Hi guys. Oh. So we're Dip 11. True.
They advised us not to shout because it's recording.
I see. So this week for Climate Week, we've chosen to register the microclimate through four main themes. The first one being air, playing with the performative aspects of the invisible forces around us. We also have excess materials, the sampling of surfaces, as well as the transformation of materials through registering the climate. So for our first theme of air, we'd like to show a video. So we're all, there you go. And if you'd like to talk about it.
Is this also on? No. We made this little device that has a sail attached. We call it a sail, which is essentially paper that's in tension with suspended needle. And we were looking at slowness, air displacement, people walking by, people opening doors, windows, and kind of celebrating that.
So our group is working on excess materials that we consider almost expired, and we collect materials around school, and the AA, and around workshop, and using the method of compressing and casting and cutting, trying to review these accumulative layers of excess materials. So this is a video showing some of our process.
So the intention that we had by separating into four groups and applying different methods and having different scales of observing the microclimate of the AA was to make visible some of the invisible effects in different scales that climate change has, or it's kind of resonated within a smaller scale within 36 Bedford Square. This photogrammetry maybe.
Yeah. I was quite interested actually because we as a unit use a lot of scrap. We go all around the school trying to find different things, and this is you can just loop it, Jeffrey, actually. I don't know if it's even showing very well, but this is our studio. I've rendered it white because honestly everything mixes together anyway visually. It's such a ridiculously collaged sort of image as you walk in there. And it's quite confusing, and it's a representation of all the scrap in the school, really. So Jeffrey, you can go to the next video. So what I did was start scanning these areas, these sort of material centers in the school, and finding actually that the relationship between our studio, way up on the 3rd floor, and the workshops, different workshops, Material Arcade, where else? Various other places. Actually, it's the scale of these spaces that gets translated into our studio is actually really quite different and quite amazing, actually. So it's kind of interesting to think of it how it becomes a bit of a circular economy, and also thinking about how we actually move throughout the school and track these different things and find them. Have you got the images I sent as well?
The images.
Okay, don't worry. Well, anyway, there's images basically of exactly where our unit is in comparison to all of these spaces around the school, and you kind of end up seeing our unit as a sort of, I don't know, it looks like it's floating off in the clouds, far too far away from these spaces, even though that it's something that's made completely from them. And I don't know, after doing it, it made me wonder actually how do we become a bit closer to the workshops, even throughout the school, because it's so easy to get locked up in your own unit and forget about it. And I think as a unit for ourselves, there's always been a bit of aesthetic that runs through it because of scrap that we use. So it's quite interesting actually, or important I think to challenge that a bit. And I think actually this year we still use lots of different kinds of materials, different kinds of styles.
And looking at the photogrammetry, it's interesting to see how an object changes value when it changes its location context, even within a small, like microclimate such as the AA. A material that would just be thrown off in the workshop in an abundance of materials gains a huge value and potential when it's placed in context in the unit space, in all of these additive methods of making. So it's the simple act of relocation and registering with the images that Henry produced. That was quite an interesting phenomenon. And to move maybe even to the opposite scale of registry, up close. Selin can talk about the latex.
Yeah. So 1, 2, 1. Is that? Of course, as from seeing from Henry's video and photogrammetry as well, there's a lot of materials that we accumulate there. But then we also work with these intermediary materials like latex, which is sort of, you apply it, it takes a bit of a process, it dries, and then when you peel off, you get a bit of the context with you there. Similar with Mook's clay examples, for example, here. These are all registering the areas of school that are exposed to air, so in direct exposure to the microclimate of the school as well. And in the samples, you can see sort of like the textures sort of going around. Maybe I get to. And then this is sort of the material evolution by grabbing, as I said, a bit of the school with it, sort of. So this exploration was, as Jeffrey said, a part of the sampling material group. Yeah.
For the sampling group, we all use materials that are very relevant for our projects, and we all got different results from different medium that we're using to pick up these areas that are affected by the microclimate within the AA, and we see all sorts of walk of life essentially from the evidence that's picked up from these materials.
Yeah, so we tend to use materials to reveal different aspects of the environment imposing onto buildings. So for example, my piece, I use this paper to cast an inverted volume of this a space on the facade of 36, and it sort of pour water to sort of absorb the dirt and moss accumulated. So it's really my way to sort of looking at unexpected relationship between materials and buildings and present it in different ways. Yeah.
As a group, I think we have separated into somehow changing materials in a way that when we use materials or when we register things or capturing them or harnessing them, we've started to visualize and think about how can we harness something out of AA, a microclimate, which I think it's quite connected to what Henry talks about, which we recycle materials as well and we change the purpose as well. But our main intention was somehow capture an air pollution, capture the quality of the air and then the quality of the water, like a pH strip, that it shows some sort of qualities, either to remind, recognize, or realize. So throughout time with our object that we've just made, the strips are capturing things. All the strips which are connecting, having a relationship with the materials and the metal, it just gets rusted. Throughout this, we can also see that the functioning objects are changing, not in form, but in color, but it informs. So we placed it into a few different areas of AA. It was kind of dangerous at first, but that we had to find a way to shoot them, right? So we placed them, and then in order to understand or fasten the process, we used some bronze dust and also salt and vinegar to apply it on the strips, and this suction somehow started registering more, and then it was just in a matter of maybe 6 hours or so, the strips has changed its color. So you can say that it's very, very quick actually to change. So in a microclimate, sometimes things can change very fast as well.
Yeah, I think as our sort of way to register the microclimate within the open courtyards of the AA, which are they're a very prominent and very sort of engaging space amongst the AA. I think tarnishing as a way of informing the sort of air pollutants and the moisture within the AA was a very interesting way of reinterpreting our initial idea of the pH paper, of evaluating, the invisible conditions of our microclimate. In the beginning, you can see in our object our sort of interpretation of a gutter that we found just everywhere within the AA, and how that plays with different sort of characteristics of how water engages with thread. To the left of our object, we have a much more condensed and concentrated sequence of threads that play with larger surface areas, whereas the right side tends to play with more air exposure and sort of has a less concentrated sort of form. I think what's interesting is the difference in tarnishing and oxidization that actually can be found on these threads. On the more concentrated areas, we see a lot more teal. I guess
it's about you can quickly recognize with a scale. So there are two different scales to this.
Yeah.
One is quite lightweight, maybe, but one is quite heavy in terms of maybe the visual aspect of it. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's a huge amount there to respond to. So for a week's production, it's produced a lot of thoughts as well as some strange and interesting material configurations. So first, one or two observations. I think you've extended the old-fashioned idea of what a microclimate is to a kind of a microclimate of a material culture. And the photogrammetry and some of these, the slab pieces sort of made me think of when human civilization is gone, if there's some alien civilization investigating the Earth, that they they will be uncovering compressed layers and tortured materials and strange configurations, and trying from that to imagine and reconstruct a spatial culture. And archaeology has always done that. So what little we know about Harappan or civilization, prior civilizations in the US and in China, those processes were exactly like that, of uncovering compacted or distorted materials and then trying to reconstruct kind of cultural practices and spatial practices from them. So it's the kind of technique for your finding your kind of ideas about space and creating your own approach to a generative project. I think this is an amazing start. It's kind of beautiful in a slightly weird and slightly creepy way in some ways. The photogrammetry, I don't know if you've seen recent investigations of ancient Italy and Egypt, but exactly that they uncovered these spaces by sending little devices down into tunnels and places that humans couldn't go. So it's beyond human perception to produce those kind of images. And then from that they try imaginatively to recreate a way of life that is somehow matched to those spaces. So I think this is a kind of strange and interesting technique for finding future spatial practice and material practice. Is that too far out there?
No, I was sharing your thoughts, really. So thank you for sharing your experiments. I really love them. I agree with Mike on your ability to find the space beyond human perception. So the way I'm reading is that you've done the things that you've done to try to reveal scales and impacts that otherwise sit too lightly on the natural senses for them to be perceptible. And in that way, you are creating a set of tools and technologies in the same way that, let's say, science created instruments to see the invisible, which we might call X-rays and radio waves, a whole bunch of 19th century stuff for being able to see the invisible. I think you have together created a set of tools to start seeing the invisible, and you have kind of redefined the focus of that interest. So if, let's say, the Enlightenment science was about breaking things up into their components, what's interesting about everything that you've done is you're looking at the invisible to see the relationship between the thing that you're looking at and environment and these kind of other elements. So it's not a kind of a scientific reduction. You're doing something else. The unit for observation is something that's more like a knot. So I thought that was really, really interesting. I also love the accelerated geology. I absolutely agree with Mike that there's something to do with compressing time, matter, to accelerate time in relationship to the human, so that you end up with a kind of a supra-human view of traces that you may have left behind or intended to leave behind. And so I think what I would love to see from this is a kind of way of drawing your experiments to kind of show some of this compression. I think the scans were amazing. The photometry was amazing, but I'd love to see a visualization system that can help us kind of read this, let's say, distilled Anthropocene. So it seems like you're kind of remaking the Anthropocene in a kind of a concentrated space of time and through these, kind of selected elements. And it's absolutely fascinating. It really feels like a periodic table of, weirdness yet to come. So, yeah, brilliant. Absolutely fascinated. Want to know what you're going to do next with it.
Thank you.